Ask everyone attending this meeting to mute yourself unless you're recognized to speak. Please note that the committee meetings of the RTD Board of Directors will be held remotely via Zoom and will be recorded. The meeting recordings, along with the unofficial minutes of the meeting, will be posted as soon as practicable on the board's website. During today's meeting, we are providing communication access real-time translation, also known as CART. Anyone who would like to access this service should send an email to the RTD board office at rtd.boardoffice@rtd-denver.com, and a link will be provided. Additionally, the CART transcript can be automatically translated for anyone who would like to access the transcript of this meeting in Spanish. A live stream of this meeting is also available via RTD's YouTube page. I would now like to call the roll for the committee members. Jim Brendel.
Present.
Vince Busick is absent. Michael Guzman.
Present.
Matt Larson.
Here.
And John Ohlenberger.
Here.
Okay, for the record, I see that we also have just me as a non-committee member present. The first item on the agenda this afternoon is the selection of the committee's chair and vice chair. As board chair, I will facilitate the election, and once both seats are filled, turn over the meeting to the new committee chair. Unlike the executive committee election process, which uses secret ballots, for the election of officers for committees, leadership appointments will proceed on open nominations, discussion, and vote by the committee. Any member of the committee is eligible to serve as either chair or vice chair. We will begin the selection of the chair, and then the vice chair will allow up to 3 minutes for those committee members who nominate a candidate and those seconding nominations, if any, and any members who would like to speak regarding the candidates, including the candidates themselves. I will then call for a vote, and the candidate with the most votes, shockingly, will be appointed. If only one committee member is nominated, the committee may proceed by acclamation, and that member will be appointed. I will now start by asking for nominations for the committee chair.
I'll nominate myself.
Oh. I would have nominated. All right, Michael Guzman. Is there a second?
I'll second, but I thought I read that there doesn't need to be a second nominations.
No,
I could be wrong, but
I think you're right.
But in any case, I'm very supportive of that.
Okay, all right. Okay, so we will now open discussion for any of the committee members like to speak about. Actually, Jack, didn't we took a step back when we get all the nominations on the table and then speak in favor? Okay.
Yeah, that's usually cleanest.
Are there any other nominations? Okay, seeing none. We have one nominee, Michael Guzman. I will afford anybody a chance to speak about the nomination before I ask about proceeding by acclamation. Here, this is like the most silent group ever. You're way better behaved than the executive committee. Okay, so with Michael Guzman having been nominated, I would now like to ask if anybody opposes moving forward by acclamation. Seeing none, Michael Guzman will be chair of the Audit Committee for 2026. I will now seek nominations for committee vice chair. Are there any nominations for vice chair? And I will sit here until one of you speaks up.
Well, I was vice chair last year. I'd be happy to do it again if you'd like me to.
All right, Jim Brendel has nominated himself as vice chair, and we do not need a second. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? Seeing none, I would like to ask if anybody opposes moving forward with Jim Brendel as vice chair of the Audit Committee by acclamation. Seeing none, I congratulate the chair and vice chair of the Audit Committee, and I'm very hopeful that you guys will play an important part in our agenda. Before I shut up and move off the committee, I do want to say that this is, one of it's puzzling to me because this is, in my mind, as significant as any other committee we have on the board, and it should draw the most interest. And I know it's a new committee, and I know we're building the stature and conduct of the committee. But this committee is so vitally important, and I'm very appreciative for our outside members that have agreed to help us, and of course our inside directors leading the way for the board. So I'm going to turn it over to our chairman, Michael Guzman, and I am muting for the rest of the meeting.
Okay, sorry, finding my place in the script. This is the public comment section, so I would like to open public comment to anyone who would like to address the committee regarding any topic listed in the published meeting agenda for the current and immediately preceding agendas. If you wish to speak and have not already done so, please either raise your virtual hand or press *9 on your phone. During this time, the committee will not offer any direct comments or responses. However, if you would like to be contacted regarding your public comment, please email the RTD board office at rtd.boardoffice@rtd-denver.com. Mr. Kroll, are there any hands raised at this time?
Committee Chair Guzman, at this time there are no hands raised.
All right. With no speakers in the queue, we will go ahead and close the public comment section, and we will move forward to recommended actions. There is one recommended action on the agenda this afternoon for the internal audit function charter. This is for the Board of Directors to approve the internal audit function charter in accordance with the annual approval requirement. Do we have a motion?
I'll move.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ollenberger.
I'll
Is there a second? Thank you, Director Larson. I would like to ask Kelly Mackey, the Chief Financial Officer, and Matt Marino, the Chief Audit Executive, and partner Ruben Brown to present this item to the committee.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Kelly Mackey, Chief Financial Officer. As part of our ongoing commitment to strong governance and risk management, we are introducing the internal audit function charter for your review and as a recommended action today. This charter is a foundational document that defines the purpose, authority, and responsibilities of our internal audit function. It ensures alignment with best practices and provides clarity on how internal audit will support the organization in achieving its objectives while maintaining independence and objectivity. And to walk us through the details and answer any questions, I would like to introduce Matt Marino, the agency's Chief Audit Executive from Ruben Brown, and he will present the charter and outline its key components. Matt, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Kelly. Dave, do you want to pull it up? Luckily, this year it's not as substantial as some of the updates that we did do last year. If you remember, for those of you that either attended the meeting last year or were on the committee last year, there were some updates as a result of some auditing standards updates. So those were approved last year. So there's really nothing specifically other than just really the internal function audit charter talks about the purpose, what's the authority, who do we answer to, what there's certain elements that we must have as part of the internal audit function charter. So Dave, if you want to go to the next page. Talks that you need to be independent, who I report to as your outsourced CAE, oversight, how that would occur and all that. Any questions you want me to specifically speak to? Because I know there's probably far more interesting things other than approving a charter that doesn't have changes. So.
Yep. Matt, that was my only question, and you may have just answered it, whether there were any changes from last year. It sounds like the answer is no.
There was no recommended changes this year.
All right, are there any other questions from committee members? Seeing none, I would ask for a vote to approve this. Are there any objections to moving this forward? Hearing none, that will pass and we can take it to the board. Mr. Kroll?
I'll just note for the record that we will update the date this was approved and the signature once approved by the full board at the meeting at the end of this month. So this will read, when it's all said and done, with Chair O'Keefe's signature and approved. I believe the board meeting is February 24th, 2026.
All right, thank you. All right, let's move on to the discussion items. We have 3 important discussion items on today's agenda. The first item is for the draft 2026 Audit Committee Work Plan. I would like to ask Kelly Mackey, Chief Financial Officer, to introduce the current status of the work plan and outline what additional input or action is needed from the committee.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So the internal audit work plan will actually be presented by Matt Marino. So Matt, I'll turn it over to you to present these details.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So as part of the audit charters, we're supposed to come up with an internal audit work plan. And so we're denoted to have so many meetings a year. And so it would be helpful to get all that spelled out ahead of time so that we can make sure we know what's coming when. So obviously we're meeting today. And then we are proposing that we would meet again in April. And so there would be included in that topic would be internal audit update, proposed internal audit plan for full approval prior to sending it to the board during that meeting. And then we would also again meet in June, and included in that agenda would be internal audit plan one more time. Annual comprehensive financial report from our external auditors would be part of that one. That would be slated for our friends at Plant Moran to come and present the audits, the results of the financial and single audit engagement, and then an internal audit update. And then we would meet again in September. That would be internal audit update, where I would update you on any of the internal audit functions that we've occurred. And then lastly, one more meeting for the calendar year in November, where we would go through any audits, and then external audit, pre-auditor communications would also occur during that meeting. So it's very similar to the timeline that we have had in the past, but we wanted to specify what was tentatively scheduled to occur at those different meetings.
Thank you. Are there any questions or input to provide from committee members? Mr. Ollenberger?
Yeah, I was just looking, I looked through the packet for today's meeting, and it looked like there was an internal audit plan included in today's packet. I don't see that in today's agenda, at least not on this plan. So are we going to be reviewing the internal audit plan that was included in the packet today? And if so, are we also reviewing that in April? Where do those sit?
Well, I guess we're reviewing the enterprise risk assessment, which will drive our internal audit plan. So we have some sketched internal audit potential plans, but we're really going over the enterprise risk assessment. Sorry for that oversight. I should have clarified.
Okay. And then are we providing input to the plan today, since the plan is part of the enterprise risk assessment? And then is the purpose of the agenda item in April to finalize that plan if we come back with any recommendations as a committee?
Correct. So as was consistent with last year and in the prior years, when we've presented the results of the risk assessment and we've received any input from you, the committee members, because your committee membership, as was previously mentioned, is very important and one of the more important functions of governance at RTD. So we want to make sure that we take any of that input from you all and come back to you and propose another draft of the audit plan in the future. And then once we do that as a committee, we need to bring it to the board for final full approval. So
thank you.
I would also say, because I know Jack will jump on this if I don't, that the work plans are a living document and they are meant to be updated throughout the year as we find need for them on our committees. And so this is basically just a way to say this is our best guess at what's going to happen for the rest of the year. So the opportunity is absolutely there, and my email's open to make changes at any point. Working with the vice chair and with Mr. Marino and Kelly Mackey, we can figure that out. But we do need to take something back to the board just so that they are apprised of where we're at in planning and be able to speak to that. So this is just a helpful document to keep us organized and forward looking. Mr. Kroll?
Thank you, Chair Guzman. I just want to note real quickly that we will likely have audit committee appointment recommendations to tackle in either September or November. We'll have to talk about the timeline for that, but we will have, I believe, John, your seat will be up again for reappointment at the end of this year, and then Director Busick's seat will be up for a new director, since he won't be on the board again next year. And then Director Guzman, depending on whether you continue your service on the board, I don't believe it would be something we would bring to this committee, but we would still need to bring it to the board, a proactive action to allow you to finish your term, which ends at the end of 2027. Your term as an audit committee member, I should specify.
And the other piece that is not on here is that these work plans run through February of the following year, typically. And so we've worked through the end of 2026, but we haven't discussed what would happen within the first 2 months of 2027. And that's part of this process as well. So I'm going to make a note about that and we'll talk about it. CFO Mackey?
Yes, Mr. Kroll and I actually spoke about that since this is a unique committee that I believe, and Mr. Kroll, correct me if I'm wrong, this actually, we don't need to have a work plan and we don't need to extend it through early 2027.
Okay. Good. All right. Are there any other comments? All righty. Let's move on to our second item, which is for the internal audit update. Once again, I'd like to ask Kelly Mackey, CFO, and Matt Marino, our Chief Audit Executive, and partner Ruben Brown to present this item to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next on the agenda, the internal audit update. This is an important opportunity to review the progress of our audit activities, discuss key findings, and ensure alignment with our risk management and compliance objectives. The update will cover completed audits, ongoing engagements, and any emerging issues or recommendations that require our attention. It's also a chance to confirm that corrective actions are on track and that we are maintaining transparency and accountability across the organization. So to provide these details and answer your questions, I'd like to turn it over to Matt Marino, who will walk us through the update. Matt, please go ahead.
Thank you so much. I should have mentioned earlier, I am getting over a cough. So if I inadvertently mute to cough, I'm trying not to cough in all yours ears. So I just want to ask your grace with regard to that. So as Ms. Mackey mentioned, this is our internal audit status update. So as far as key accomplishments, we did issue a report during this last quarter that we're going to talk about at a high level today. It's got to do with staff shift and staff scheduling an extra shift. And so I'll talk about that in following slides. I won't go through that in too much detail. We are mostly through the contracted services with relate to information technology support. So that field work was 90% complete at the time of these slides. And at this point, we're probably about 100% complete and working with management to derive the recommendations that will come out of that. So the next audit committee meeting, I would expect to have that report ready for you. Parts inventory is in the planning and scoping phase of the audit. We've looked through the enterprise risk assessment refresh, and so we'll be talking about that here a little bit later, as was talked about earlier. We're also going to be conducting an audit with regard to transit police, so we're conducting initial planning and staffing. As is mentioned in the bullet point there, we were necessitated to find a new small business entity to contract with, and so through late 2025 into early this year, we did contract with 2 additional SBEs to supplement our audit staff and also meet the contract requirements as part of the overall contract that 10% participation from an SBE. And so rather than going with one single SBE, we decided to contract with multiple, and we'll continue looking for additional resources so that we can bring the best resources to the RTD, whether it be specialized resources or just more general resources. Any questions with regard to the current accomplishments and status? Immediate next steps and area of focus, I already talked on it a little bit, was the SBE contracting. That's fully underway, and that will they've started. We've kicked off work with them as of last week, and they'll be taking the transit police audit themselves, one of the SBEs, and will oversee their work, but they're going to be doing the majority of the work. And so that is important to point out. The audit plan creation is, yes, Mr. Ollenberger.
Just could you briefly list the 2 SBEs that you are onboarding and what their specialties are, or if they're general internal audit?
DMD Consulting is a general internal audit expertise out of the Chicagoland area. And then the other one is Superb Corp, and I would say they're more of a general audit, and they would probably supplement our staff. I don't know that we would at this time hand off an entire audit. So
Thank you.
Mr. Honick, did I miss anything describing those 2 people?
That's correct.
The 2026 audit plan creation is in process. I do want to point out that we'll talk about it some in the future during this meeting. We are aware of the recommendations from the Oversight Committee, and so we will review that and come back to you as part of the when we present the final audit plan and see if there's any scope changes, timing changes, or new audits that we might decide to add that you all may not add today as part of that audit process. So we are aware of that report. We'll see, monitor what the state legislature is deciding to do with it, and we will go with the tailor the audit plan accordingly. And then we've continually been following up on management action plans. So we request documentation for several of them, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. There's a slide specifically on that. On the right there, you see the audit project and where we are as far as on track, slight delays or major delays. The red is obviously major delays. Staff scheduling an extra shift is issued at this point, but it did get a little bit behind. Contracted IT services, parts inventory, and the are in the slight delay category, and then enterprise risk assessment refresh, transit police, and the follow-up are on track. So as you can see, it's going to be a very busy Q1 of 2026. So I'm sure the staff and management of RTD will be very happy to hear that. So
I have a question for you, Mr. Marino.
yes.
There are a number of open observations that we're seeing. Do you know if we're seeing audit fatigue from management, or was most of that just the need to get the SBE replacements taken care of from last year to this year?
The SBE replacements wouldn't have an impact on the open audit recommendations. The open audit recommendations could either be a result of staff changes within RTD, strategic realignment with pushing something further down the road, but it has something to do with either strategic realignment or staff changes within a given department, so that somebody might need to take over and start closing out other management action plans. Did that answer your question?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yep. I think I mentioned it during the last audit committee meeting. The previous SBE did unexpectedly close up shop, so we weren't planning on doing that, but I'm glad that we did get the opportunity to reevaluate the marketplace and provide some additional opportunities to additional SBEs. And so I've already talked on that very detailed, but it was not something that was planned, and it did take a little time to find the right parties, but I think we are confident that they'll be able to contribute in a meaningful way and get work done. Okay, next slide. So here's a kind of an internal audit plan, long-term look. So if you remember, well, some of you weren't necessarily on the committee, but some of you were. We had previously approved the audit plan that basically will run through July of 2026. And so this looks back at the historical audits as well as looks forward on the upcoming audits. And so the green audits are items that have been completed. The blue items are in process and trying to get wrapped up. And then obviously the pink and the darker pink are upcoming audits. And so as you can see, I've already touched on several of the completed audits and then the in-process audits. Some of the upcoming audits for later in the year, we have infrastructure and facilities preventative maintenance, capital asset management, human resources recruiting and hiring process review, service scheduling, employee training and program follow-up, and then the Oracle ITGC follow-up has been canceled at this time. And then obviously project planning administration and follow-up on the management action plans is ongoing. But more or less, no major delays other than things that were either, if you notice the asterisks, some of them were shifted due to reprioritization. Sorry, I'm really struggling with some words today with trying not to cough. So, but some of it also has to do with changes that we had asked for permission from you all to defer into future dates. And so this is just making sure we touch base on where we had planned to be, where we are, and where we will be going. So next slide. So this is the internal audit report management action plans tracking. So you'll see here that there's the project name, there's the number of observation, and then there's the title. And so you'll see in several instances, there's either a date or there's a struck through date. And so we're currently tracking 35 open observations. Only 4 high priority management action plans had target dates on or before January 31st, 2026 are still outstanding. So we're working on closing those out. So we're only re-reporting the ones here that are high, but there are other observations that we're working on closing out and working with management to understand, does the target date need to be revised? Or can we get the supporting documentation that would allow the management action plan to be deemed put in service and we could close it out? So, yep. Appendices. So I'm going to go over the staff shift and extra shift internal audit executive summary here shortly, and then I won't go over the report rating definitions and any of the other stuff. So keep going. So as was mentioned earlier, we did review the staff scheduling and extra shift overtime review. So what were we looking at? How is extra shift and overtime? Why is it incurred? How is it approved? How much are we doing it? What are the processes around that occurs? And so we did have a overall rating of needs improvement with regard to this audit. We did have 3 high risk and 3 moderate risk recommendations. What was noted during the audit process is, I would say, the entity was incurring probably more extra shift and overtime than is desired. And so I've already met with the leadership team to discuss how do we go about improving systems to monitor the extra shift and overtime, but also improve the pre-approval of some of the extra shift and overtime. The way the system was currently configured, the people system, or your ERP, didn't necessarily have a functionality to pre-approve the extra shift and overtime before it occurred, and also to easily distill who might have approved it either after the fact, and also gain some of that information. So it is something that is a high priority, and with the projected fiscal deficit that the entity has, it is important that we get a handle on why the extra shift and overtime is occurring, because there could be valid reasons why extra shift and overtime may be occurring, but it could be indicative of, do we need to hire an additional FTE? Do we need to reprioritize work? And we need to understand all of that as part of the improvement as a result of this audit. Any questions with regard to that audit?
Mr. Ellenberger?
Yeah, don't we normally have the audits in our packet? I just saw this executive summary, but I didn't see the actual content of the audit and the actual findings that were in here, unless I'm missing something.
The last couple meetings, we had only been doing summaries in order to keep it more high level during the meetings. However, if you would like to get a copy of it, we can definitely forward you a copy of it.
Yeah, I would like to see that. I think it would help me engage more with the report and be able to bother you guys with more questions on it. I mean, I guess with the findings that you had here, do you feel like RTD has it together in terms of why we need to do extra shifts? I mean, it's the title of the audit is staff scheduling and extra shift / overtime review. You were talking a bunch about extra shift and overtime, but that might be a function of staff scheduling. If the staff scheduling isn't appropriate enough, maybe that results in overtime. Maybe someone doesn't show. Is this making sure that the RTD has processes in place to try to minimize that? And I guess, did you cover what the issues were within your summary that you provided?
Yes, I did cover it as part of our leadership team meeting, but we were looking at it really depends on the division and or department with regard to the extra shift or overtime and how that is occurring. But we did note that there is no overarching policy that's in entity wide that kind of drives how that is occurring. There were limitations with regard to this system on getting relevant information to help to derive the reasons why it was occurring. And then as you correctly alluded to, is there a scheduling deficiency? If we remember back many years, there were the shortages as a result of COVID. Well, well past that. And so it's now time to reevaluate and say, are we correctly staffed in areas? What does this data tell us? And let's look at the schedule. Let's look at the overtime that was occurred and see if we can see, was there an emergency or was there just shortages that were pre-scheduled that we should have more appropriately managed?
So would it be appropriate to say that the RTD was unable to tell you why the overtime was occurring, and based on the data that you saw as part of your audit, you were unable to ascertain why there's the overtime involved?
Sorry, General Manager, CEO, your hand is raised. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, all. Deborah Johnson, General Manager and CEO. Just to ground everybody in some elements that are critical to this conversation, I did want to note that the management action plan will address the findings, but also the extra shift pay was eliminated by the management team effective February 8th of this year.
Thank you. Mr. Marino?
Thank you, GM Johnson. That is an important element to update the committee on, is that the management team was already evaluating this, and then the internal audit just further validated the need to reevaluate that, and then the management team did take that action of eliminating that going forward. So it, but there were limitations on, the policy wasn't universal. The system was not set up to show who had pre-approved it. It's always approved, but it wasn't necessarily pre-approved. There wasn't always documentation always available that was easily available. And then one of the other recommendations had to do with evaluating to make sure that employees that either might be exempt or non-exempt, making sure that they're in the correct classification for their current roles and responsibilities, just as things have changed over time.
And to be clear, I'm not necessarily opposed to overtime so long as it's managed appropriately. Is eliminating, and you said extra shift pay, obviously we can't not pay time and a half to non-exempt employees. Is elimination of extra shift pay going to become a problem with getting the people to do the work if someone doesn't? I was kind of assuming some of this is because someone doesn't show up and we need to get someone else to cover their shift or something like that. If we eliminate some of these incentives, is that going to be problematic in fulfilling service requirements?
Madam CEO?
Yes, thank you so kindly. So our Chief Operations Officer could speak to the overtime efforts, which are separate from extra shift pay, but keeping in mind that we're a multifaceted organization and there are some classifications that are garnered by a collective bargaining agreement, whereby some other elements relevant to extra shift pay have been a practice of the organization. What we have done, to the point that our Chief Auditing Executive was speaking to, that the organization had already been looking at this, and I can attest during the course of my tenure here, we started looking at this several years ago and needed to align practices in relationship to the Federal Labor Standards Act and things of the like. As we move forward, we were able to bring that full circle and are making additional steps, or taking additional steps relative to the CBA. So I thought I saw the Chief Operations Officer on the call, but
I'm here, Deborah, if you need me.
Thank you, Patrick. Appreciate it. So I'll yield that to you to sort of color in the aspects of the shift work, recognizing service delivery and the other tenets of the CBA to which we adhere. So thank you very much, sir. Mr. Chair, if he may.
Mr. Preuser, please go ahead.
Sure, Patrick Preuser, Chief Operations Officer. So the staff has worked collectively and collaboratively to assess whether there is an ongoing need from this point forward related to extra shift. And the conclusion of all those efforts and discussions was that we could continue to perform the required work without extra shift. So that has since been closed out or ceased, if you will. From an overtime perspective, recognizing that this is a system, wanting to make sure that we added additional structure in place for the process, for the system, so that everyone involved in that process, from the top leader to the frontline employee who may be requesting overtime, ultimately has the structure in place so that that can go through the proper review, and then also ensure that there are controls in place. And I can't say that so far has been working well. There are daily and weekly reviews when it comes to overtime, and that process continues to get refined, but there hasn't been any impact to work. There has been a decrease in overtime, and that process in and of itself is continuing to mature.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right.
I also had just one more point, and not necessarily related to this specific audit, but did we decide as an audit committee to remove the full reports? Can we bring that back, or did the committee decide to eliminate them? And if so, I'd still like to see them. But if the committee didn't decide to eliminate them, maybe we could bring them back in the packet.
Let me pause on that real quick. Mr. Marino, was there anything else that we needed to discuss with respect to this part of the conversation? The staff scheduling extra shift?
I think the management has correctly defined what was going on, and we can continue on with Mr. Ollenberger's inquiry.
Perfect. Mr. Ollenberger, I'm in alignment with you. I would like to see the reports myself to be better informed and understand what we're talking about with a more full understanding. I think you raise great questions, and the point is, if we don't have that information, we're not able to conduct this work the right way. So I don't remember it being decided by the committee, and it may have been one of the meetings I missed last year, but something we can certainly discuss. CFO Mackey?
Yes, I will certainly work with Matt to ensure that those get sent via email to the committee going forward.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Mr. Ollenberger, is that good?
That's good. Any reason not to just put them in the packet, or?
You know what? I don't know. Mr. Director Larson, sorry.
Could we put them like in a directory somewhere so people could just go and look at them rather than, rather than having to go through emails when you are looking for it, it could just be stored centrally somewhere and everyone could just download them as needed. I don't know, just a
Accessible
thought.
archive. Like an accessible archive or something like that?
Yeah, yeah. Because there's also then, like, what about all the ones that have happened in the last however many years? It'd be great to, potentially know that they exist and look and look at them without having to go through every board packet to find out what happened.
CFO Mackey?
Thank you. How about we include them on a shared drive and email a link to those, but also put them in the packet going forward? Will that work for everybody?
I like that idea, and I kind of second. I like the idea of having some kind of repository, because sometimes I've wondered, like, well, did we already audit that, or did we look at that? And then if there's any kind of overall internal management, like here's where we are on things dashboard that could go in that SharePoint, might be helpful too. So thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Marino, your hand went up. I do have a concern before you say that, just something we need to consider. And maybe this is me just being hyper vigilant as a director, but should we be auditing something that is sensitive, I think we would need to be able to ensure that we have the correct controls in place, that that information would not be inappropriately shared and put us at risk as an agency. So I would like to, if it's okay with everybody, yes, I think we should get these reports as members of this committee. We are entitled to them under the charter, but I also want to make sure that we understand our responsibility in having that information, and that it is not something that can always be made public. And so we need to use the appropriate discretions when necessary. Two hands shot up. I will defer to the general manager, CEO, and then the chief audit executive, Mr. Marino, in order. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Committee Chair Guzman, for your comments. Just for everybody's edification, when there is a sensitive subject relative to any audit, as we would do with other board matters that are privileged, generally those are contained within executive session. We have redacted reports and things of the like. So I just wanted to make that statement to provide some assurances relative to protecting the enterprise and minimizing risk and exposure. Thanks. Oops.
I'll just also just add, we did have one of those last year. I think it was IT security controls. I do believe as a committee that we as committee members have access to view all those. And General Counsel Snyder, I believe, said that if any of us would like to review stuff, unredacted copies, we can do so in person at the RTD office.
Yeah, that's the practice that the directors follow as well. Mr. Marino?
You all pretty much took all the words out of my mouth, so I was appreciate everybody being all over that, and so I don't have anything further to add, but I didn't want to just lower my hand and say, well, he's just raising his hand for no good reason.
Sounds like we will make a fantastic team, y'all. I'm excited. All right. I'm sorry, I need to go back to my notes here. If we are done, then are we moving on to the third item, Mr. Marino? Just a head nod.
Yes, I'll work with CFO Mackey to make sure we either if we can include the entire report in the packet, we will, but if it's got the sensitive matters, we will work through providing a redacted or whatever the appropriate level of reporting to provide you the information needed to monitor. So
great. Thank you so much. All right. So our third, wow. This weekend has been a very heavy Spanish weekend for me for a multitude of reasons. I'm sure you all understand. So my English tongue is catching up with me. The third and final item for this committee is the enterprise risk assessment. And for this item, I would also invite Mr. Matt Marino, the Chief Audit Executive and Partner, and Dave Horonic, Manager, Business Advisory Services, both from Reuben Brown, to present this item.
thank you so much, Committee Chair Guzman. I am going to have Dave Horonic help me present this because I'm not quite sure my voice is going to hold out for the entirety of it, but I will chime in to where where I think is necessary. But this has been a multi-week process that started in late December and has concluded. I know many of you, the directors or committee members, have received survey requests. You've sat down and done interviews with us, as well as key members of management. And I want to thank everybody for their collaborative efforts, providing their insights and their thoughts on how to better the operations of the district. And so I'm going to let Dave talk about some of the results and the process, but I just wanted to make sure to thank everybody for their part in this process because it was a highly collaborative process.
Yes, thank you, Matt. I am going to just hit some of the process to start, and then I'll key in on some of the highlights that I feel are worth noting, and then we can have any discussions. And the audit plan, as we mentioned earlier in the meeting, will be included at the end. This is a draft. We're definitely taking everyone's input, and we will then calendarize from there. So I did want to point out that we had great participation in the survey, excuse me, and anything over 70% is usually considered a success and almost required just to get good numbers. So I'm happy to report 93% participation from both the agency as well as the board of directors. So thank you for that. The process usually is for at least that we've been doing it at the agency is we go through, have a series of interviews. In this case, we focused on the new directors just from a time perspective. So we had the invitation out to everybody. We were able to have meetings with 3 or 4. We then had, I believe, I'd say 12 or so interviews with key management at the agency. So we were able to get a lot of information, which then led to us updating the so here is the exact numbers that we're talking about, and with the different departments. So then that leads to here, this document then gets updated based on those interviews. We were able to come up with or identify a couple more key risks this year. Some of them, I believe you've probably been discussing in the past, but they really kind of rose up to be identified this time around. One of them is the public trust and reputation, always an important risk, but just seemed to be highlighted more this year, as well as the let's see, the other ones that might have been came in were, the federal funds management was a key one. With everything that's going on, just with politics in general, and you never know about funding, and just to make sure that everything is going well in that regards and the agency is getting everything that it's entitled to. So that was the next step of the process, was updating this risk universe, which then helped us facilitate the survey, which we was somewhat brief this year. So we did have to, just to be able to make deadlines. So we had it open for about a week. As I said, great participation. And then from there, we get the following results. Happy to report here is the top 5 risks. The risk preparedness is not as bad as one would maybe expect from looking at the top 5. So that's pretty good from that perspective. There is difference from the previous 2 times that we've done surveys. So the top 5 is remarkably different, I'd say, this time around. I think no one can deny that number 1 would probably be the biggest risk facing the agency, and so that was I guess kind of shows that the survey could be working as intended. There was a certain weighting. Let's see if I have the results of the weightings here. At the bottom of this slide, we did weight a little bit more, obviously indicating that the senior management might have a little bit more understanding or be closer to some of the facts. So with so we did weight the survey a little bit. And then I always like to show this slide. In the past, we've just showed the top 5 and where they plotted out, but we did show all 16 risks that we surveyed. And I always like to draw a line right down the middle, and it almost always comes out to be the top 10 above the line. And those are the ones that the agency should be focusing on. So almost a clear indication there of that. And I'll pause to see if there's any questions.
Committee members? Oh, go ahead and keep going.
All right. So these following slides are really just more of the breakdown of the survey results. So we have the severity rating, the probability rating, and then the risk preparedness rating. Risk preparedness was not surveyed to the board because they're not necessarily always aware of the certain controls that the agency has put in place to mitigate these risks. But then we have our overall rating. So it's sorted by results. And I will say that the overall ratings are slightly lower overall in general since the last time we surveyed. So that was, I guess between the severity as well as the probability, and then probably more importantly, the risk preparedness, that could, show that we're trending in the right direction as far as an organization. So this is what I alluded to before when I jumped ahead to talk about the risk ranking process, so I won't go into that. And then here, I'll pause again really quickly, but then before we get into the actual plan.
Mr. Marino?
I just want to point out before Dave jumps too much into it, we've had several new key leaders at the organization. And so this risk process took their input into account, which is important because Deborah and the team are constantly changing. And so at this point, we've now filled many positions that had previously been vacant. So it was important to get their insights as newcomers to the organization and also help them get up to speed on what some of the issues that could be affecting the organization. So I did want to point that out as well. Thanks, Dave.
All right.
Okay. So as we mentioned before, we have the audit plan, and in order to kind of capture everything that we've been doing up to this point, as well as, and so that doesn't get lost and forgotten, we roll over certain things that maybe hadn't finished from the previous plan, just so for transparency and able to track that. So some of these you'll see are still being conducted. We're currently working on the contracted services regarding IT. So that is just going to roll over onto this plan unless we were able to finish it before it doesn't before we go and formalize the new plan. So I'll just speed through some of these that are already you've seen before. And then we started adding a couple. So as I mentioned, the one of the new risks was we definitely wanted to have an audit that would help address that. And these are just tentative scope descriptions that we kind of came up with quickly based on these conversations. So we're open to any new project, obviously, as well as any, maybe scope, something to think about when we go through it. And then we also do, anytime we do a kickoff and audit, we always do almost like a pre-kickoff to talk about potential scope. And then that way we're getting actual management's input. So sometimes we learn that something is maybe not even relevant any longer because of whatever reason, as well as anything new that we need to consider.
Mr. Marino?
I won't go into specifics on.
I do want to highlight the federal funds in the grant. This was something that was highlighted not only by CFO Mackey, but several other members of management. And I do want to point out that management has already started kind of making sure they get an understanding of how this process, kind of the universe of this process, how take inventory of what's going on, and then we're going to go behind management and kind of do a post-mortem on what have we done historically and what should we do to further improve this process. As was discussed earlier during the meeting, with the change in administration and the volatility in politics in general, it's important that we constantly monitor which fundings, whether it be federal, state, or local funding, and that we maximize the funding, make sure we draw it down as soon as administratively possible, because there has been political moves in the past where administrations have decided to discontinue programs or grants, and so we want to make sure that we are not overly exposed with undrawn down money, whether it be federal, state, or local funds, and that we're making sure that we utilize those funds in the most judicious manner possible. So this is very important because we do get a good amount of funding to help not only with the operations, but the capital improvements and maintenance of the organization. So.
Thank you. Mr. Ollenberger.
Thank you. Do you have, or could you prepare a mapping of the risks to the audit plan to ensure that that we're covering off on our top risks that we have via an audit, and conversely that the audits that we're doing are based in some of our top risks? I didn't see any audits in there that looked like not good audits to do. They all looked like good audits, but it'd be nice to be able to link them together to the risks and make sure that we're covering our key risks, and that if we're doing an audit, that it does align with our top risks.
I think that's a great idea. And actually just looking at this slide, we could even update to have what key risk that it points to, the number, so it can be referred back to. But then on the flip side, we'll have the key risks and maybe an intended audit or review that would address that. I will point out, as you know, I'm sure that not every risk can be audited. Usually some of them are inherent, but we could spell that out.
Yeah, actually, so the number one risk, the revenue volatility, I kind of looked at that, like, can we actually audit that? Is it just a federal funding source that might have been cut off and discontinued, and we're just not going to provide that funding anymore? Well, if they don't. And then number two kind of resonated with me. With the whole work from home, I really wonder how that affects a lot of things, including public transit. And I think you're covering that in the scheduling and service scheduling, that one. But to see that linkage, I think, would be beneficial. And then I also have another comment on a potential audit or an area of concern that I had, but I'll pause and see if any other committee members have comments on things.
Mr. Larson? Director Larson, sorry, excuse me.
You're on mute.
For the revenue volatility, I guess I'm trying to think what actually fits into kind of an audit process, but is there a way to sort of audit the options we have for getting revenue or something like that? Or is that kind of outside of what could reasonably be part of the scope? And similarly with the ridership, is there any way to audit sort of, I mean, and I don't know if this would overlap with the COA, but audit if we're providing service efficiently, essentially, so in order to maximize ridership. I don't know if those are things that kind of fit into this committee's role or not.
Yeah, from a audit perspective, I guess we would have to, put our heads together as a team to identify how, best to identify. A lot of times an audit maybe doesn't necessarily have to specifically test a certain thing, but it's maybe more just bringing facts and observations to the committee. So we could see what we could do from that perspective.
Madam CEO.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair Guzman. I did want to state, as some of you may be aware, and I know I spoke with Mr. Marino about this, relative to, public transit being heavily audited. And there are some audits that take place by virtue of us being recipients of federal dollars. And we do have the triennial review. We submit ridership data to the National Transit Database and things of the like. And so I just wanted to qualify that because the chair made reference early on to audit fatigue, and there's some elements that may have some overlap. So just sharing that for edification, not saying that it can't be done, but just wanted to ensure that while we go through the internal audit cycles, we are preparing for other audits. As the board members do know, we're bringing forward our FTA drug and alcohol policy. That came by virtue of an audit that was done and enhancements that were made in, statute and things of the like. So thank you for the opportunity just to share that information.
Mr. Marino.
I thank you for the feedback with regard to the kind of how do we mitigate the higher level risks. And so the revenue volatility would be harder just because our revenue is multifaceted, both with user fees, sales tax support, as well as federal, local, and state grant funding. And so that's why some of these audits will kind of hit elements of our revenue, but maybe not an overarching specific one with regard to that. And really a lot of the risk could be interrelated, i.e. ridership could be down due to public perception of the organization or whatever it might be. And so that's where if we handle some of the ancillary risks, it might help shed light on some of the more primary risks. But some of the topics are very broad, and so sometimes it's pull back and say how do we make this audible to give the decision makers relevant information so you can set policy or direct management to consider certain items.
Mr. Limburger.
I guess I'll talk about a couple of my concerns or thoughts on this. So I'll start with that number 2 risk, ridership demand, lifestyle trends risk. Again, this is something that is of interest to me specifically, but I would be interested. I know there's a lot of data. Every time you board a bus, the driver hits a button or something saying that there's another rider on that bus. So, and I would guess that probably tracks this rider got on this route at this time, and this is how full the bus is at this time on each. So I think there's a ton of data out there. I'd like to know how, as part of this audit, and I think this goes into a staffing and scheduling audit, how that's being used by the RTD to determine route frequency. Do we keep the route? Do we ditch the route? Do we change frequency? And then also, if you change frequency on certain routes, that could potentially discourage ridership, right? If the route only runs every hour instead of every 15 minutes, I might hop in a car or get an Uber or find another form of transportation than if it's like my 15-minute headway A-line train where it's easy to catch. It's every 15 minutes generally. So those are some of the things I'd be interested in that. And I see you have your hand up, so I'll pause before I get into my next topic.
Mr. Marino?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Ollenberger. You are 100% correct that there is that data. And so I did want to point out, as GM Johnson did point out, that the specific ridership data is reported as part of the NTD reporting process. And so but I do understand the secondary part of your statement, that how do we use that data to make data-driven decisions. And so that we could look at how to audit that with regard to using the data that we're already producing for either, whether it be NTD or whatever. So thank you.
Thank you. And I'll bring up my second topic here. As I drive down Colfax, I see the bus rapid transit construction going on. And that brought up some questions in my mind that I don't know if those necessarily hit the risk dashboard, but just taking that project in and of itself, things like, do we have an owner's rep for that project that's monitoring the construction, or do we do that in-house? I've done construction audits, and we've generally found stuff that we don't necessarily want to be finding as part of that, but generally billings that aren't in accordance with contract, billings for change orders that really should have been part of the original agreements, those types of things where there are specific construction audits for that. So is that something that internal audit should be doing? Or I would say I think that's something that somebody should be doing, whether it's done internally, whether you have an owner's rep, whether this internal audit team does that, whether you've hired a third-party construction auditor specifically for that. I feel like that project, and I'd also like to know what the cost of that project is, should be audited. Another facet to that, in addition to the actual costs of it, construction projects, and I think we had a capital, like a treatment of capital audit on there, but I'd also like, as maybe as part of that audit, to look at how does a capital improvement project go forth in the first place? Do we do a cost benefit analysis, like taking the BRT? Did we look at that and say, how much is this going to cost? What is the benefit? Who's making the decision? Probably the board, as to whether or not this is a appropriate project and worth the money to implement. Is it going to increase ridership? What are we going to get out of it as a district for it? And then is there other capital projects out there that we should be taking a look at?
That's a great question. I'm going to go back to the beginning. General Manager, CEO Johnson, please correct me if I misstate anything here. We are RTD holding a pass-through grant for the City and County of Denver. The BRT project and construction costs, we are simply releasing funding to them through our budget because we can hold the federal funds that were given to that project. It's not an internal RTD project. Our part will happen once the completion of the project occurs, and we have to place ticket vending machines or start running buses along that infrastructure. But it's actually the City and County of Denver that would need to be the responsible party to do any kind of auditing on that construction cost, billing overruns, etc., because it's not handled through RTD. We're working as a partner in this, but not the primary agency. Did I get that correct, Ms. Johnson? Please go ahead.
Yes, thank you very much, Committee Chair. And quite naturally, recognizing that you said it's a pass-through, RTD is the FTA designated recipient of those dollars. Hence, we receive those and we reimburse the city and county for the work that's incurred, excuse me. But further to the point, recognizing that we have entered into agreement with the Federal Transit Administration, and I, as the accountable executive, have signed certificates and assurances. This will potentially be part of an FTA triennial review. So that's all I wanted to add. Thank you very much, Chair Guzman.
Yep. A little bit different than our normal capital improvement projects. However, everything else you said, yes, the board does make a lot of those decisions depending on costs and what prioritization is needed. And we are advised by multiple groups at RTD, which include the CFO, who gives us a real-time understanding of what the finances look like for any such projects, but also a need for any type of capital improvement. And there's a lot of questions from board members on the Finance and Planning Committee about that same information and how we continue growing that process. But a lot of it right now is dictated by the Transit Asset Management Plan, which is required by the FTA for all public transportation agencies, and the 2026 TAM is available for public review and has several years of information in there about our capital improvement process. what those cost benefit analyses are, and how we prioritize the work that needs to be done. And any spending on those projects in particular would be the purview of this committee to audit and make sure that the costs do not overrun in any of them. Madam CEO.
Great job, committee chair. And just another element that's germane to this discussion. Quite naturally, we have been talking about the federal government, and by virtue of statute, there is a metropolitan planning organization, which is the Denver Regional Council of Governments, i.e. DRCOG. Relative to any type of transportation improvement projects, we work through DRCOG as they have the responsibility for planning. And so those projects are approved within the TIP as we go forward as well. So that's another important nuance piece of information for you all to be cognizant of. Thanks.
Thank you.
So, so is the RTD a pass-through entity and the city and county of Denver the subrecipient? And if that is the relationship, does the RTD then, and I believe the answer is yes, because we do a lot of subrecipient monitoring in our firm, but does the RTD have a fiduciary responsibility to ensure that the funds that they pass through to the subrecipient are used for their intended purposes, have controls around them, and are used appropriately? And how is the RTD handling that fiduciary responsibility?
That's the right question. We got there. CFO Mackey, please go ahead.
Yeah, so that's why I raised my hand earlier, but you guys were getting close. So for example, yes, the answer to your question is yes. And 16th Street, for example, they are a subrecipient, and we do monitoring for 16th Street to ensure that it remains in a state of good repair. So similar in other instances, correct. And then Plant Moran checks on those, our external auditor, to ensure that we're doing that subrecipient monitoring.
Mr. Marino.
And since I get to do auditing when I'm not doing this, I'll kind of color a little bit more on subrecipient monitoring. It's multifaceted. Obviously, it starts with entering into the agreement with who you're subreceipting the money to and making sure they understand that it's X money that's federal, but is also monitoring results of their audit. So the city and county of Denver will be audited, and there will be, as a result of their audit, they would could potentially have recommendations or findings that RTD should consider if they were to further partner with other organizations, whether it be Denver, Arvada, Lakewood, any party that they would be subreceipting money to. And so it's kind of a constant process of when are they turning the reimbursement requests in, substantiating the reimbursement requests, and making sure that all of our processes are working around that. So it is, with regard to the construction audit, usually that would be the actual owner of the project that might do that, because they might have signed the actual contract to know what was in scope. But if there were an RTD project that was large enough in scope, I imagine the internal audit department could potentially do it.
And are there other large scope to this extent, or to a pretty large extent, that internal audit should be looking at or considering in the risk atmosphere?
That's a good question. I would defer to the general manager, CEO, or the CFO on this one. Go ahead, Ms. Mackey.
No, I mean, the biggest currently underway, biggest subrecipient is 16th Street. There's one other that's much smaller. There may be others too that would be substantially smaller, but it's definitely, there's 16th Street, another sort of sizable one, and then East Colfax BRT. Those are the main ones.
Currently no internal large capital projects?
Madam CEO.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So we have a multifaceted rail reconstruction project upon which we are ensuring that we are bringing our inaugural light rail line that opened for revenue service on October 7th of 1994 up to a state of good repair. We have finished 2 segments of that and are in the sequencing phase of working with our contractor to commit on another critical facet in the downtown loop. The projects, in reference to a monetary threshold, they're substantial in the millions. So there could be opportunities as we go there, but that is reconstructing rail as we go forward. So potentially that could be something that this committee, audit committee, basically assesses going forward. Thanks.
Mr. Marino.
And then just one example of a project from the past that has been audited as part of the internal audit project is we did look at the DTO DTP contract and making sure that they are providing whatever requirements that they were to do as part of that agreement to RTD so that we can continue our ongoing monitoring of their operation under that agreement. And so that was a very large scale project for many years ago that had not necessarily construction costs that we had audited, but the continued compliance with the agreement to make sure they were providing the necessary service levels or data that was required and spelled out in the agreement.
I do recall that. Thank you. And I think they paid for it, but then we need to monitor the operations agreement.
Any other
And just-
questions?
Just to put the cap on this one, when is the BRT project anticipated to be completed?
Oh, Madam CEO.
Yes, so basically, off the top of my head, I believe it's the latter part of 2027, maybe like third quarter 2027.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Dave, I think it's back to you to continue going through audits, I believe.
Right, so I will see if there's anything else noteworthy. I believe this is spend governance was one that was interesting that came, just to make sure the organization or the agency is lockstep with the board on how things may work from a funding and special requests.
So for example, we as a board have established fiscal policies that we are to be adhering by, and so we would potentially audit how do projects either align or misalign with the fiscal policies that were spelled out, and were the fiscal policies amended or potentially overridden. I wouldn't want to surmise on anything, but we would be kind of monitor back to the spelled out policy with regard to the board and management, making sure we're moving the project forward in alignment with whatever policies that are outlined there.
And other than this work of resilience and succession planning, which is really more it came about from just the different challenges that the agency is facing, from just everything from succession planning to retaining workers and everything regarding that. That would be one. And then this policies and procedures review that's kind of aligned with risk number 16. And you might wonder why we would be doing something that is corresponding to such a lower priority, but that is something that was expressed to us as maybe systemic to the agency. So if you kind of review that process and put some recommendations in place, that could help almost every department within the agency. So, and then the rest here is just time for following up on corrective actions, some additional administrative and project planning, as well as any ad hoc projects that might come in, as well as the projects that we're discussing now. And then we might hear from anyone between now and the next meeting. We'll then try to get the a scope description and get those included as well. And that's, I believe, that.
Great. Mr. Marino.
As I alluded to earlier, we are very aware of the accountability full audit report. And so just due to the constraints of getting this into the packet and making sure that it was in good form, we will re-review that accountability recommendations and make sure whether there's any alignment or additional modifications that should be as a result of that report that was issued, and see how we might help mitigate those items if there were any items that we could mitigate.
All right. I like it. I have a question. Just for verification, Mr. Ollenberger, 2027, that is when they are expecting to complete that project, and they're at just under 50% of the construction work done. The design's almost complete. That information's available on Denver's website because it's working from both sides into the middle. from the Aurora side to Denver and Denver side to Aurora. But the dashboard that they have is pretty easy to follow along with there, so it's something that can be pulled up really quickly. With respect to a couple of things, do we have a hard kickoff date for the capital asset? Sorry, excuse me, for the parts inventory audit? This has been pulled forward since 2024 by my research, and we're now in 2026. So are we gonna get traction on that this year? Do we expect to be able to move forward with that and actually have some answers? And my concern for that is really making sure that we have the right information available to staff to report to the National Transit Database correctly on available parts and inventory and be able to plan appropriately. CFO Mackey?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So Dave and I spoke about this just yesterday, and I think there is nothing holding us back from getting started soon. He's reaching out to key members of staff to get this internal audit going, so I don't see any further delays.
All right, thank you. And it's more the concern that it has taken so long to get here. So I just want to make sure that I'm staying on top of it. Mr. Marino, Mr. Horonic, and I met, and they know that I did a lot of research backwards to figure out things. So I want to make sure that I'm staying on top of it. The last question that I have is about the spend governance and financial accountability review. Given the timing for the budget creation through the Finance and Planning Committee, which typically falls around October, if we find things in that audit that are brought forward in October, November timeline, do we expect that that's early enough to be able to impact any of the work through the finance team to be able to ensure we're not making any mistakes there before budget approvals go to the board? The timing is a little bit scary to me. CFO Mackey?
I agree with you on this. I thought about this earlier too. I prefer to do it earlier in the year if we can, because if we do see that a change needs to happen, this timing would not work in order to incorporate it into the 2027 budget. It would be too late.
Okay. So then I guess with that, my suggestion would be, can we please move that one up in priority to get it done a little bit sooner, if that's possible, as a request and a gentle reminder. The board committee's work plans are already available, but we know the regular routine of our timeline, and that seems a bit late to be able to affect change that might be necessary. And under new leadership on the Finance and Planning Committee this year, I think it would be awesome to provide them with any informative work to be able to affect a better outcome before the end of this year. All right. Is there anything else?
I was just going to add, I was going to try to raise my hand, but I don't know if I'm allowed that for some reason. I can't find the button while I'm presenting maybe. But that is a very good point, and thank you for that. So if there's any other audits that we need to discuss timing, that was one thing that I wanted to express, that these are kind of just laid out, based on, we identified it, and I won't say backlog, but, the list of other items to complete. So we're more than welcome for any recommendations on movement.
Mr. Marino?
Yes, we very much appreciate the prioritization of items that could make change at the organization. So that's why this process is a meeting process, to get the input of you all, or even if other directors that are not present on this meeting provide insights to you all, we could still make change for the plan. So thank you for making sure that the audits not only meet the needs of it, but the timing is relevant to how things happen at the organization. So
awesome. All right. All right, going once, going twice. Anybody else? I don't see anything. All right. Enterprise risk assessment. All right. So we are at other matters. Are there any other matters to discuss at this point? Seeing none, I will give the reminder that the next audit committee meeting is scheduled for Thursday, April 9th. And at that meeting, we will take action on our committee work plan, hold a discussion on our 2026-27 internal audit plan, and we will hear our regular internal audit update, for which Mr. Ohlenberger and I are in agreement. We should have some insight to those audits before we discuss them, please and thank you. And if there is no other action, then can we adjourn at 3:20? I call it adjourned. Thanks, y'all. Have a great afternoon. Appreciate your work.